up, everybody? Matt Aguilar here from Comicbook Nation, and we are here to talk Star Wars Unlimited. And our very own producer Pete hopping up from behind the camera, behind the scenes, to actually get to talk some Star Wars Unlimited with me. How are you, buddy?
Hello there. Doing good.
Always jumping in on the comments. I very much enjoy the spicy comments you bring to the show each and every week. And I think I have you to credit for the helmet.
Yes.
The helmet thing that has started forever and now has become a staple.
You're welcome. I gave you your brand, your personal brand.
So. Very much so. Well, thank you for jumping on here with me. I've been really enjoying Star Wars Unlimited, but haven't had a ton of people to actually talk about it with. So this has been great. We typically talk behind the scenes as other things are starting to film, and I thought, hey, why not actually get to do it in a video itself and talk about this? So the game has been out for a little bit now. It's actually launched, rolled out. People have decks in their hands, and we're starting to get into even some teases of set 2 and things like that. So I thought it would actually be a good time to, now that we've had some time with the game, actually do kind of a proper review of it, and then also, as more information comes out about the rest of the rollout for set 1 and leading into set 2, kind of our biggest takeaways, how it's doing, overall reception, mistakes being made, things that it's doing well, all that kind of stuff.
Yep, sounds good to me.
So let's get to a review. So first off, for you, how much kind of time have you spent with it? What are you thinking so far about the just core gameplay overall, but also the rollout and everything that comes with it? What are you thinking so far?
I think the game itself is probably the best new TCG in a long time. I know that apparently the One Piece card game is really huge. It started, I think it's actually third or second in sales, but I haven't touched that one yet. But Star Wars Unlimited has been kind of all the things I want my card games to be. Like it's not just a Magic clone, but it's familiar enough to be easy to pick up. But it has a lot of depth to it with the different aspects, which is basically their system of colors or mana for all the Magic players out there. And it's got a lot of variety, and it still has a lot of room to grow, which I like. Like there's a lot of stuff is viable out of the gate. The one deck that seems to be doing really well is this Sabine Wren aggro deck, which is just almost pure red, lots of low cost cards hitting you really fast. But even that has counters, and it's just nice to see a game come out of the gate that's pretty well balanced, because normally there's always one kind of runaway color or one kind of runaway faction in a game like this, and that doesn't seem to be the case here, which is great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you touched on one of my actual favorite parts of the game, we'll actually get to a little bit later, but I do love that we have some room to grow. And I think it shows, because in some of the leaders, I've toyed with, and this is actually the first game for, oh my God, even for a long time, that I have tweaked this much in form of my decks and trying out different combinations. It has made me want to do that. I've been testing so much more than I have in previous games like this, just because it's fun. It's fun to experiment. It's fun to get different combinations together, see what it does. Sometimes it does not work out, and that's okay. but sometimes it does, and it's also too, I mean, we even get into Twin Suns later, I started building those decks out as well. So
I got a Twin Suns tournament on Friday.
So yeah, it's really the I will say kind of the customization options right out of the gate is really promising, because it's only going to get better from here in that respect, because you're getting more cards, you're going to get more options, more leader options. So that is really promising. That is something I really love about the game. And the other thing that you touched on was approachability. I think this is the fact that someone can really genuinely pick this up and learn it in 15 minutes.
Oh, 100%.
I think that's such a huge win. And also, I mean, look, we'll get to this too later on, but I think that's also where, Disney Lorcana excels in that approachability aspect of being. I taught my mom that game
Mm.
in like 15 minutes. Hasn't ever touched a trading card game and was able to learn that. And the thing is, this is the same. I can teach her, I can teach anyone that's coming into this. Hey, here's how it works. Two planes, your leader can kind of jump on the battlefield, but it's like a one-time thing, and it's a big deal when you do it. So there's not all these extra layers here. You can really dive into that if you want, but just core gameplay of how it works, and that you're always doing something. It's you're never bored. You have an action due at in minutes, if not seconds, depending on who you're playing
Yeah.
against. So I think that just works to its advantage. So I mean, so far, yeah, I'm really enjoying the game. I think it's really kind of monopolized my attention. I've actually heard about the One Piece as well, and I'm curious to try that out, but I haven't had a chance to either.
Yeah.
But right now, all of my attention is to this.
Yeah, agree. And it's got the way you use your leaders, I love. I love the whole, you've got your leaders for, maybe one or two big turns, but they still have their foundational action every turn before and then every turn after. Like they don't really die. They just go back to being an action card instead of a unit on the battlefield. And I was
Right.
a big fan of the old Star Wars LCG that the Fantasy Flight did years ago. And I love that they kept one of my favorite aspects, which is that ground and space. I love that there's two different arenas, and the one thing that this game does differently than almost any other game I can think of, like I haven't played it, but like someone was saying, like maybe you can do this in Yu-Gi-Oh, but I have no idea. Is that I love you get to the attacker targets what he wants. The defender doesn't get to
Yes.
say so. The attacker gets, but it makes every action have a lot of choices because if you don't attack a unit and you attack a base, all of a sudden that unit's free to attack your base or do something bad to you. So everything, like every single turn in the back and forth, it's not like my turn, your turn. It's my action, your action. Makes it feel a lot more engaging than a standard Magic game where it's I do all my crap. You maybe play a reaction card if you have one. You do all your crap, and then we go back and forth every single action. I love the flow of the game is very good.
Yeah, and it also there's a I'm glad you touched on that because there's like an immediacy to utilizing your units because
Mm.
depending on you don't have to spend I like that the game essentially tells you like, hey, use your leaders. Like don't
Yeah,
just let them sit there. Like when you can put them out on the field, do it because you need to time is that's not necessarily on your side, but that also applies to units. When you have a unit on the field, like it's better not to just put more cards out, which some games encourage you to do,
mm.
right? You're more about planning and strategy. Here it's like use the ship before it dies because if the other
Yes.
player gets rid of it, you'll never get to use
And
that
it makes
ship.
playing every card, and the fact that you do that, and then it's alternating actions means that when you play a card, you have to think like, I'm playing this card. Is there anything that my opponent's going to play to just wipe it out? Because most cards have to survive an entire round before
Yeah.
they because they come in exhausted or tapped for mana or Magic fans out there. And so you've got to figure out, is this a safe time to play this card? Would it be smarter to maybe hold this card and play it next turn? But then everything is like a very calculated risk in this game, which I really like because every decision has weight. And I like in like early stage Magic, like basically you just crap out as many creatures as you can because that's just how the game
Right.
plays. Yeah.
Right. And that's honestly I actually kind of had to like not, almost like retrain my brain because actually that's just, kind of how you would assume you would approach of like, okay, I need to get a bunch of units out. I need to get a bunch of units in space. I need to get an equal amount of units in ground. And that's really not, if you do that, you're going to probably end up in a rut at some point. Like you're going to be behind the eight ball because someone's going to start picking at your units before you can actually use them. And then two, that also brings in initiative, which I think is like genius in this game. I think
I love
that's
that system.
it's so important, like to claim initiative. I
Yeah.
have never. It's been so long since like a first turn mattered like that.
Yeah. There have been a lot of games where I've won because I decided instead of playing this last card and using my last 2 or 3 resources, I'm going to pass to get the initiative because that means all the cards I played this turn, I get to go with one of them before my opponent can do anything. And if I hit their base for hard enough, that wins the game. Or if I take out a key unit, that wins the game. And so even knowing when to stop playing cards and take initiative is a huge decision, which is why this game is it's not wildly complex, but it's like brain hurty in all the good ways. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, very much. I agree. And, and that's also too, diving into the other side of it, which is like the collectability
Mm-hmm.
side, right? Because everything is aesthetic. It's not, doesn't affect stats or anything like that. And then of course there are some super slick promos out there and things, but those will probably be limited in tournaments and things like that. So, it keeps it all. I've been very much. I haven't had a showcase yet. I bought another pre-release kit, and I still don't have a showcase.
I pulled the
on top of
showcase
a
Sabine
booster.
Wren that I sold for like $270, but my friend has bought one box and the pre-release kit, and he pulled a showcase Indira and a showcase Leia, and he sold the Leia for like $480.
Yeah,
So it's basically our showcases have more than financed the game so far, which is great. If I can keep this
showcase
rate up,
Leia is
that'll
the
be
one I
fantastic.
want.
I doubt I will be able
Well,
to.
well, and for me, like I have my goals set small because I haven't even got a showcase, right? And also, I'm very jealous because the Leia is the one I want. That card is
The Leia
gorgeous.
one's cool. Yeah.
But the being able to, I'm really trying to build out certain sets now with complete hyperspace, like character. Like if I can have 3 of a card, right? I want to try and get all 3
Yeah.
hyperspaces. Like that's kind of my goal, is what I'm aiming for, and only in select ones that I've got more than one. So I'm keeping it small. Same with foils, right? The foils are slick, especially with the hyperspace foils. I think those are
They're
just
nice.
gorgeous. So and I have obviously some legendaries and stuff in there. So I'm happy with the cards. That part has it's a fun bonus to what is a really fun core experience. But I'm not as like just taken with like, oh, I must get all the shinies, even though they're awesome, and I do try and force them into my deck sometimes. It's like, I don't need this card, I just want it because I just want it on the field at some point.
And I do love, like, one of the great things about this game is that each of the colors, each of the aspects does kind of have its own identity. Like over here, I'll throw up some red. Like the red stuff, so basically the aggression aspect is very much kill cards, it's aggro, it's very on brand, whereas your control aspects are a little more, like the blues, a little more defensive, lots of shield, lots of sentinel, lots of you have to hit me, you can't go somewhere else. And I love that everything has an identity, and I love that we're already getting to the point where keywords matter. Where there's a lot, like for example, my favorite deck right now is I love to run Hera as a leader because Hera lets you break aspect on Spectre models. So basically, if you're a fan of
Yes.
Rebels, because the Rebels crew spans every single color, but every single aspect but one. And normally, you can only have 3 aspects at most in your deck without paying a penalty. Hera says, ignore that if you're paying for a Spectre card. So you can put Ezra in a deck that doesn't have any cunning, any yellow aspect. You can put Kanan in a deck that doesn't have any blue. Like I love that I love that interaction on the Spectre keyword exists, and you see a lot of that with Imperial units and Rebel units, and even like Trooper subtypes. I love that they have that fun keyword stacking that Magic has, and they've brought into this game while still making it like kind of a unique twist on something that they're already kind of doing with the 6 aspect system.
Well, and so that actually is a perfect tee up, because what's great about Hera specifically, I think is a perfect example, is that because right now there's only 6, right? Or 6 Spectres
Yep.
in the current set. And so like I started number one, I traded to get Hera because like I hadn't gotten one in
Yeah.
any of the packs, right? And I still have like there's like still three, I think three leaders that I still don't have just because
Mhm.
I haven't come upon them. Um, so and of course there were I think actually one's a common, but the others are rare, so it's understandable.
Yeah.
But like her her deck and a couple other ones have like right now it feels like they have a little bit of a ceiling
Mm.
because of the number of things. But
Yes.
what I enjoy about this game is that, and they teed this up kind of in a designer Q&A of like they're working on year two content right now, right? So
Yeah.
they have like so like they've got other sets in the rearview mirror already, and they're like those characters might be a little underpowered now, but as more and more cards come out, like those have so much room to grow. And I'm not saying the other ones don't, but like there's certain leaders that are already built into here that like, man, by like set 2, set 3, these things could be monsters. And I
Yeah.
really love that.
I think it's 100%. And I think, yeah, before we get into like our cons of the game, I think the last big positive has to be that even though this is a new game, um, everything that comes out now, even if it's slightly underpowered, still feels playable. But
Right.
everything, there's such a foundation for a wild change in the future. Like when the next set comes out, I think you'll start seeing monocolor decks. I think you'll start seeing like because you can sort of do mono aspect or double aspect now, but I think
Yeah.
by the time the second set's out, you're going to see a lot of that. Just people streamlining down to like one color with like a splash of something else. And I just loved it. And you'll see those cards and those leaders that have specific abilities. Let's see. I'll pull up Jin for example. Like Jin is one of those leaders that just works with everybody. Her
Yeah.
action is just a straight up penalty for the defender, and it's just that's just always how it is. She's pretty simple. But then you've got ones like Hera who have, like I said, they built-in Spectre, built-in keywords on the Spectre thing. You've got Leia, who's same thing. The more rebels that are in the game, the stronger Leia's going to get because she gets to it. Like that's such a good ability to attack and then attack a second time with another rebel unit. Like that's so strong, and that's just going to get stronger. And you're going to see these leaders that might not be seeing a ton of play now kind of blossom without hurting the leaders that are currently doing very well now, like the Sabrine Wrens. Like it's just going to be it's a very strong foundation with still having so much room to grow, and they're clearly future proofing this very well.
Yeah. I agree. I'm currently rocking a Thrawn deck.
Yep,
That
I got
is
one of
kind of
those.
my main thing there. And I
Exhaust everything deck.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yep.
oh my god, that's it's amazing. And two, he's one of the few like this game doesn't currently, and maybe this is a good segue into things that not necessarily
Need some
outright
tweaks.
negative, but
Yeah.
things that yeah need some tweaks. Like this game, the cards that are in this game that have you manipulating the deck don't seem very useful
Mm.
a lot of times outside of like unless you have a leader like Thrawn who already automatically off the bat
Just knows
dude
what's
is
on
set
top
up
of your
for
deck.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, is set up for that. So like those cards matter. And you even brought up like the double aspect thing. Like there's a couple of those cards in here, but not nearly enough to be able to like fully maximize
Right, to really
that kind of
justify a
potential.
deck around it. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
nice.
so
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things of like, okay, the second set doesn't hit for another what 2 months?
Yeah, I think the second set is supposed to be a May release. Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's of course it is because it's for May the 4th. Yeah, of
Oh
course.
yeah, that makes total sense. Boy, that was brilliant. But yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like we're already starting to see it. We knew this when they kind of announced
Mhm.
the strategy for that. And for the one hand, that does I was happy with that because it does give you more time to settle in and experiment with things and
Mhm.
figure out what works for you before everything changes again. So I enjoy that. But it does like once you hit a ceiling on something, it's going to be a minute before you can actually like make any change to that because of the switch up in strategy. But that's just something that like I've noticed and like certain decks are going to get kind
Mhm.
of put to the side for me even though I enjoy them.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily competitive enough to compete with someone who is hitting with, Darth, for instance. My God, like taking on a Darth Vader starter is like insane sometimes. You just get hit. Sabine is another one. So, there are some things like that that the rollout does affect. So I am seeing some of that. But what are you feeling?
I would say the only real negatives I have for the game, and probably because I come from such a big graphic design background, is that I think a lot of the artwork on the basic cards is way too simplistic and too flat and cartoony. Like
Mm,
some artwork is very good. The showcases are almost all universally fantastic, and most of the hyperspaces are pretty good. But a lot of the basic cards just look like baby's first sketch of a Star Wars character. And having seen other Star Wars card games with much better art, I've always kind of wondered. It felt like they didn't spend the most of their budget on the artists for these things, because there are some fantastic card artists out there. I mean, just look at Magic, or even some of the new stuff. Aether Storm, I think, is coming. The big one on Kickstarter has some pretty great art. Like, they could hire better artists to make the game a little more visually appealing. And there are a few great ones out there, and there are a few classic pieces of Star Wars art, but there's a lot of missed opportunities. Like, the Luke starter looks pretty. The Luke leader looks pretty bad. He's a very bland, like cartoony, unshaded looking Luke. But that's, like I said, that's a very personal aesthetic quibble. I think the only really big issue, just like Lorcana, is they underestimated demand somehow, and we are currently in what could be a month-long supply drought for limited, where like all the stores here are rationing their boxes to, like, they're selling a box a day because they need to have a few boxes left to do events, and even
right.
that's going to run out in a week or two. And while Fantasy Flight is promising, like, more stuff is on the way, having worked with a lot of local stores here, and worked with other stores in other parts of the country, their distributors just don't quite believe that. Like, the alliances and the ACDs of the world, like all the people that, like, get the goods to the stores, don't fully believe that there's going to be a major restock of any kind. And so they're basically rationing out what little bit they have left. And most of them are totally sold out too. So supply and demand kind of caught Fantasy Flight with their pants down for like the 58th time. But, at some point,
Well, and
someone will figure it out.
it's so interesting too, because I mean, I think they've done a much better job than Lorcana did as far as the
Lorcana's
amount of
weird
product.
staggered release was a bad idea.
Yeah, like because I've been able to find at my
Mm,
store multiple times now, like, product. Like, I can get it.
yeah.
Now I agree with you though, because mine is doing, like, they're not, so they're limiting packs, like how many you
Mm,
can get. So it's like I think it's 8 that you can get, like, at a time.
yeah.
And so, like, I went and bought, 4 more packs and opened those, and I was able to find a pre-release kit at the time. They had 3 boosters. So, like, they've got product. It's just it might not be in the amount or format that you need. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to buy a whole other box. I don't have the budget to buy a whole other box.
Yeah, they have a
But
lot of
I
two-player
want
starters left too, and those two-player
right.
starters those might be two of the best starter decks I've ever seen put together for a launch CCG. Like, the both decks are very, like, the Vader deck is probably a tiny bit stronger than the Luke deck, but the Luke deck has so many things where you buy like 3 boosters, you swap a few things out, and you're just
Mhm.
right there.
I
But the problem is those don't come with booster packs, so you're only getting a fixed number of cards. You're getting some cards you won't get anywhere else, but you don't need more than one, so there's not a lot of reason to buy more than one box, honestly.
because I agree with you. I think the starter set is like, we've had a lot of starter sets for a lot of different games. This is one I can easily, like, recommend across the board. Like, it literally gives you everything you need to play. And also, what I think makes the Vader deck more powerful is actually just the, like, barrier of entry to doing the cool stuff. I think
Mm.
there's just, like, it's just a little easier to lean into the fun of that deck and get to, throwing stuff and hitting high damage and things
Yeah.
like that. The
Blowing
Luke
shit up's
deck
always
just
funner than shielding stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Like that's the
yeah.
thing. But like between the two, you learn almost every
Mhm.
various aspect of the game, from shields to sentinel, all that stuff like is in there. And upgrades and everything. And so it's just, if you take the time to learn the Luke one, you can be just as
Mhm.
devastating that you can with Vader. I just think Vader, like, especially for someone new to the game, like Vader is going to tear you up a few times before you can kind
Yeah,
of have the foundational knowledge to really jump in. But I agree with you on the rollout. I have been able to find product much more easily. This also comes from someone who like supremely struggled to find Lorcana for
oh yeah, it's not as bad as like, yeah, as bad
two
as
months.
this is. Lorcana was, Lorcana was so bad that the stuff that they still had, people were like, even game stores were just gouging on prices because it was so hard to find. But that's, we're not at that level here, thankfully. So this is a, I would say, a smoother rollout than Lorcana. It's just still a similar issue.
It's still surprising that
Yeah.
like, it's one of those things. I think, too, I mean, this comes from, this is not, like you mentioned before, this is not Fantasy Flight's first foray
Mm.
into Star Wars games. I know there's, they loaded up on supply, but there is still some caution there, right? You don't want to completely go like
Yeah.
no one picks up this stuff and then have all this product sitting out there. But I will be curious to see, like, in set two, how that is adjusted, because I want to be able to, at this point, I would have bought at least two more rounds of product if it had been there. Like, there were
Yeah.
weeks that I went and was like, "Hey, do you have any?" And like, "Oh, we don't have any." It's like,
Yeah. If
crap.
I wasn't doing this, there's a chance I would have taken a lunch break and gone to my local store earlier to see if they had a box for sale still. But but yeah, I would say if I had to, if I on a whole, if I had to like rate this launch on a 10-point scale, I would say even with the supply issues, I would probably say it's like 8.5, 9 range. If I call it 8.75, split the difference. But I think that's probably the best I've ever seen a brand new CCG IP launch. Like just a brand new card game with like nothing backing it except for, of course, the Star Wars franchise. I was shocked at how good the game is, for one, and kind of the all the stuff they brought out, the pre-release kits, the two-player starters, those were both fantastic. And I think I haven't seen, and especially compared to Lorcana recently, who didn't launch with really anything of that degree. I was really, really blown away by how good this was. And it's just a few minor complaints here that probably keep it from being like that 9 to 10 range.
Yeah. I was, man, if I had to give it's funny because I really enjoy the art style. Um,
It's very, yeah, I will say, it's very subjective.
yeah,
I don't like
because
that
I've
like
also talked to people
deco-y.
that didn't.
Yeah, I don't like that deco-y flat art style, the simplistic art, but I know some people that really enjoy it. So
Yeah, but it's one of those things too that
yeah,
there is a clear step up when it comes to
yeah.
like some of the cards. Like,
Yeah,
man,
like
that
these,
Leia
for
looks
example,
dope.
I think are pretty mediocre cards. They're very.
Really, you don't like the Leia?
I don't like that. Not compared to this Leia.
Oh
Not
well, yeah,
compared
okay.
to like
Yes,
Showcase Leia has some style to it.
true, very true.
Even regular Leia has some nice shading to her. Like there's more realism there. Like Hyperspace Leia almost has like a strange like 90s anime vibe to it, but it's got a choice. They made a choice. Whereas if you look at
Yeah,
something like, I don't think there's a choice here. I think Leia's better than Tarkin, but Tarkin looks like he was doodled. Leia at least looks kind of smooth. But yeah.
that's doodled. It's funny because I like that Leia,
Mm.
um, as opposed to regular leader Leia. Like, I don't
Mm.
like that image as much. So it's so curious. It's so funny. But yeah, I generally like the style, as far as like the aesthetic choice of like going for almost that like caricature
Yeah.
animation kind of approach. Like the Han Solo one's another one that like looks straight, kind of like if someone did a caricature at a
Yeah,
at
see, I
like a
don't mind
festival
this
or
one.
something.
This one made a
I
choice.
don't
I
like that
feel
one
like,
either.
yeah. I feel like at least this one made a style choice. It wasn't just like draw a thing. It wasn't just like AI, draw a thing. Make me this guy. So at least they did something. Grand Inquisitor feels more like, at least that has like a comic book look to it with the line work, and it's not just flat everywhere. But yeah, there's, like I said, art's going to be very subjective on how your personal tastes, your mileage may vary, obviously.
Absolutely. On score, I gotta say, I mean, I think for me it's gonna be because a lot of my quibbles will be solved
Hmm.
as more cards roll out. So
Yeah.
like, there are issues right now for me as far as like decks I'm putting together and seeing in, competitive play, right? Like of in competitive play, certain decks aren't holding up.
Yeah.
But that's because of number one, my skill level, right? I'm not promoting
Yeah.
myself to be like the top Star Wars Unlimited player, so I'm not blaming the game for
Yeah.
everything. But what I am saying is like certain decks, just like for me, have a top right now,
Yeah.
and so until we get to some other combinations, I don't feel like they'll really be able to hit their potential. But that'll be solved as more cards come out. So that's a negative. It's a very temporary negative. So yeah, I gotta say I probably put it at a 9. 8 or 9, but probably a 9. I'll probably just go ahead and
Yeah.
throw it
It's
over the
got
hump
some
there.
room to grow, but it's pretty great.
Yeah. So for that's our full thoughts, and we kind of worked takeaways in there
Hmm.
to kind of I thought
Yeah.
that actually went pretty smoothly. Any kind of final notes for you? Anything you want to see them change or do more of in set 2?
I would love to see, because there's one, I think, fundamentally underused thing, and that is there's not a lot of keyword interaction with the underground or scoundrel stuff for cunning. That would be great to see in the next deck, because right now very few things trigger off that, but there's so much of it you have to imagine they're setting something up for the next wave or two. But besides that, I just, yeah, if you can find the two-player starter, which you probably can, it's probably one of the few things still in stock, you should absolutely grab it. You will learn how to play the game in like 10 minutes, and then you will spend the next like 4 or 5 days obsessing over how to like make each deck really hum and like make it work in the confines of like the pre-composed deck for you. And also you get a bunch of unique cards you won't be able to find anywhere else. So you may as well grab those now because you'll need them down the line. And it's really affordably priced. I think it's like $30 for the two-player starter, which is pretty great. So
Oh
I'd
yeah.
say if you can find one, grab one.
And also like, packs are 4.99.
Yeah, packs are not
That's
bad at all.
That's like that's great. I mean, it does make a difference because I went from going to get 3 and they went, oh, it's like retail's like 4.99. I was like, seriously? I was like, yeah, throw another one, and there's 16 cards a pack, so like
Yeah, they're big,
it
and you will
makes
often get double rares. You always get a foil. You'll get at least one rare. I think it feels like one out of every 3 or 4 decks is at least a double rare or a rare legendary. So like
yeah
it's good. Like it's good return on card rarity. They're not necessarily the most valuable cards because it's a new game and basically everyone just wants like Vader, Green Vader, Boba Fett, the unit, not the leader, or showcase anything. But you get a lot of cards that are going to be integral to your deck, and you get a good distribution of them throughout the packs.
yeah. For me, I would like to see, and again, I think this comes with just there's already a lot of foundation there for it. But I just feel like I vigilance and like those
Mhm.
kinds of decks are the ones that actually typically kind of speak to me the most. And while I've enjoyed having like few cards from it and like some important cards, it's always like part of another deck. Like
Yeah.
I tried toying with like a really like vigilance heavy deck right off the bat, and just found myself getting walloped.
Yeah.
And also just not like certain things about like I love the restoration,
Mhm.
kind of feel of those and being able to repair and things like that, but like it still feels like it's a complement to something else as opposed to really being able to build a force of nature type deck with that. And that is something they've teased of, hey, we want to bring uh other aspects of the aspects out
Yeah.
in future things, right? So we want to have more offensive minded vigilance cards,
Yeah.
more aggressive versions of those, staying true to that. It's not going to turn into an aggro deck all of a sudden, but it's going to be in that vein, but it's still going to be like a more offensive option. And the other thing would be for me is like it can be very, you have to pay attention to space. Comparing this to football, it would
Yeah.
be like if someone has a great running back, you have to respect the run so play action
Mhm.
works right. But it doesn't feel like it's I feel like I almost want them to incentivize it more to lean into space,
I can
because
see
right
that.
now it just feels kind of like you put people there to be sponges or to just kind of keep the other opponent honest. You don't really lean super heavy into space, and none of the decks really feel like they kind of incentivize that. Like, oh, this is really a huge space deck, and like all of a sudden you have to completely switch your strategy because someone's going to come in with this. It doesn't feel like that's there. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I'm not right on that.
No, I think late game space becomes really important because of all the like the 7, 8, 9 costs like drops that just kind of in the game. Like all the big flagships that come out, like the Chimera comes out for Thrawn and yellow, and that thing just kind of ends the
Mm.
game. There's the green one, the Executor class comes out, and it just sits there and says, "Oh, by the way, you lose all abilities on your cards,
Yeah.
and I'm going to hit you for 9 damage every turn until you die." But yeah, I agree that early game, I think there are some incentivized ones like Inferno 4, because Inferno 4 is like a 2-coster that also lets you draw, like sort your deck
Yeah.
a little. And there's a few red ones that let you like red 4 let you do red 3 lets you draw cards on attack kind of like.
Hmm.
I think there needs to be a few more of those. I think there are a few too many just like cheaply costed, just throw out like TIE fighters, basically.
Yeah.
I just put it out there, just have it out there and do 2 damage. But there's also you can run a really weird wedge deck, which I kind of want to do, where wedge pops out, and then all of a sudden all your little mini guys are a +1/+1, and so then
That's
you're just like
true.
spamming like 3 or 4 damage for like one resource, and that's pretty great. But yeah, they have room to grow with space. I think but I think all in all, it's still pretty balanced, but I think that until late game, you can sort of ignore space against most decks and be okay. Like you might get in a little trouble,
Oh
but
yeah.
you'll be okay until turn 5 or 6 rolls around, and then the big boys come out and you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And some decks right now, like the whole point is to knock you up before that even happens, right? Like
Oh yeah.
IG is like the whole
Mm.
point of that deck is to like we don't want to make it there. Like once
No.
if we've already made it there, we're done anyway. Um, and it was interesting. They did highlight in that design feature the like Millennium Falcon as being a very like underused card, like a
Yeah.
card that is just like not being used at all in a lot of decks. So that it will be interesting to see as time continues before set to some of the little strategies that pop up. Um, so yeah, so I think we've covered a
Mhm.
ton of that here. We will definitely get into set 2 down the line. There's already some information, but not a ton. So when more of that stuff rolls around, we'll definitely get into that. But Peter, thank you so much for geeking out with me a little bit here and talking Star Wars. I this has been fun, and this game has been fun and taken me by pleasant surprise.
Yeah, it's been an amazing game, and thank you for having me. And I'll go back to my normal comfort zone behind the camera, behind the scenes.
And you can check out all of our coverage on Star Wars Unlimited right here on comicbook.com. Till next time, peace.
Bye.